Have you ever looked at a painting and realised it was holding a secret? Not just a secret about the artist's feelings or a hidden symbol in the brushstrokes, but an actual clue to a violent crime. This is the true story of how a painting created in New York City in the mid-1950s ended up preserving vital evidence that would later help a historian revisit a murder case. The artist was Robert Rauschenberg, a restless, experimental figure who was reshaping American art at the time. The painting was called Collection, finished between 1954 and 1955, and the crime took place on the streets of Brooklyn and Manhattan when a group of young men known as the Kill for Thrills gang terrorized the city. It sounds like a movie, but this one really happened. Let's rewind to New York in the 1950s. The city was booming, skyscrapers rising, jazz clubs buzzing, the world of art exploding in Greenwich Village. Robert Rauschenberg was in his early 30s, renting a small studio in Lower Manhattan. Unlike many painters of his generation, he wasn't interested in pure abstraction. Instead, he collected what the city threw away: discarded newspapers, photographs, scraps of fabric, even broken furniture. He called these works combines. Half painting, half sculpture, they were chaotic and alive, layered like the streets themselves. One of the most important was collection. It wasn't tidy, it wasn't elegant, but it was real. If you look closely, glued into its surface are fragments of daily life in New York, including headlines from August 22nd, 1954. At the time, no one thought much about those headlines, but decades later, one of them would reopen an unsolved mystery. In 2014, historian Andrew Scott Cooper was researching Rauschenberg. He wasn't looking for crime, he was writing about politics, society, and how artists reflected America during the Cold War. But when he examined Collection up close, he noticed something unusual. Amid the chaos of paint and collage, there was a scrap of newsprint. The words jumped out: "Kill for Thrills." At first, it sounded like pulp fiction, but Cooper quickly realised this wasn't fiction at all. It was a reference to a real gang that operated in New York City during 1954. The Kill for Thrills were a group of young men, mostly teenagers from Brooklyn, who attacked strangers at random, robbing, stabbing, and even killing simply, as they told police, for the thrill of it. The city had been terrified. Newspapers covered the gang with sensational headlines, and police scrambled to restore order. And here, decades later, a piece of that story was trapped inside a painting hanging in a museum. Cooper couldn't ignore it. He began digging through archives, court transcripts, police reports, every newspaper he could find from the summer of 1954. The more he uncovered, the stranger the story became. One of the gang's alleged crimes involved the death of a man near the Brooklyn waterfront. Officially, this was labelled a cold-blooded murder. A gang member supposedly confessed, and the case was closed. But Cooper found contradictions. The confession didn't match the autopsy. Witness accounts conflicted, and some of the so-called evidence was based on rumours printed in sensationalist newspapers, the same kind that Rauschenberg had torn up and pasted into his artwork. In fact, by comparing the fragments in Collection to historical records, Cooper realised that the painting itself had preserved details that no longer existed in libraries or microfilm. Without Rauschenberg, those clippings and the truth they hinted at might have been lost forever. Here's why this matters. Back in the 1950s, newspapers were the lifeblood of information, but not every issue was saved. Local editions, small print runs, many of them simply vanished. But Rauschenberg had a habit of collecting the ordinary, the disposable. and in doing so he accidentally preserved a time capsule of New York in 1954. Those scraps showed how the press portrayed the kill for thrills, often exaggerating or simplifying events to sell papers. Through this, Cooper could re-examine the case with fresh eyes. He discovered that at least one so-called murder might have been an accident, and another conviction may have rested on coerced testimony. Rauschenberg hadn't meant to solve a crime, but his art had preserved the raw material of the era, material that exposed cracks in the official story. Think about that. We usually go to museums to admire beauty, symbolism, or the imagination of the artist, but collection became something else, a silent witness. By embedding those scraps of daily life into his canvas, Rauschenberg captured not just the mood of his time, but the hidden stories, the tragedies and scandals that shaped New York. Decades later, that painting wasn't just modern art, it was a piece of detective work. It reminded us that history isn't always found in official documents or police files. Sometimes the truth survives in unexpected places, like a canvas hanging in a gallery. So the next time you're standing in front of a painting, ask yourself, what secrets could be hiding inside? In the case of Robert Rauschenberg's collection, created in New York City in 1954, the secret was a clue to a gang murder that shook the city. Decades later, thanks to a historian's curiosity, that clue helped reopen questions about justice, truth, and memory. A painting became part of a true crime story. And maybe that's the most radical thing of all. Because sometimes art doesn't just reflect life, sometimes it remembers what history tries to forget.